Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of FLOSS Weekly. This week, Aaron Newcomb joins me. We're going to talk about Weblate, software that lets you translate your software, and it interfaces with Git. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for FLOSS Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Aaron Newcomb. Episode 249, recorded April 24th, 2013. Weblate. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at StoneHenge.com, bringing you each week, or as often as I can, the movers, the shakers, the big projects, little projects, projects you might be using every day and not know about it, projects you might not have ever heard about, like maybe today's project, but we'll see. Maybe some of you already know about this project, which would be sort of interesting. But before I continue, let's go ahead and bring on our co-host. Welcome back to the show, Aaron Newcomb.
Oh, my mic's, oh, there I am. I'm here. I'm finally here. And you can hear me.
Okay, great. Well, there you are. And you're in the brick house today again, right?
I am in the brick house. No thanks to traffic this morning. It wasn't too nice, but I did get here on time somehow. So, yeah, it's always nice to be over here. I was here last night for All About Android, and I'll stay here and get some work done and then come back for This Week in Google a little later. So I try to get all those appearances in, you know, as close together as I can.
And This Week in Google is also a show on the Twit network, right?
Yes, yep. Comes on at, was it 1 o'clock, 1:30, whenever they get around to it. If you want to tune in, best to start at 1 o'clock, and we talk about Google, things that happen in Google, Android, apps that run in the cloud, like Twitter, Facebook, and those kinds of things. So yeah, it's a great show. If you haven't ever checked it out, definitely check it out. It's a lot of fun. And
available, of course, in, like all Twit shows, in both audio and small and big video format,
Yep,
I presume.
That's right.
There we go. Plug in other shows on my show. I love that. That's all cool. No, I've been on other shows, so why shouldn't I plug that show too? Right. I've been on Mac Break Weekly a few times, and a couple other ones, I think. But whatever. It doesn't. Oh, actually, I was on Twitter a couple times too. So there we go. That's enough plugging for other shows. Let's talk about this show. We've got another Translate show on, another translation software show. If you listened to last week's show or watched last week's show, we had Poodle on, not Poodle, Pootle with a T. And it was basically a way to get your software translated. And this week we have a different one with a name I'm going to have trouble pronouncing. It's Michal Shihar, something like that. There's definitely some accents that I don't know how to pronounce. English is my primary language. I'm just barely learning Spanish and a little bit of Portuguese. And I remember, like, it took 2 years of German in high school. I don't remember a single thing because I've had it till time. So we'll have to ask him about how these translations actually happen and all that. And also how it's different from Poodle. What's your take on this so far?
I don't know much about it. I mean, I know you talked about Poodle just recently. And so, there's at least 2, now 3, I guess, including this one, translation tools that we've had on the show. And it's certainly a big problem, especially, for people that are starting out a new project that becomes popular in other regions. Let's say you started in the US or you started in Germany or someplace else, and then all of a sudden it picks up in another country, and what do you do because they don't speak the language? And so I think it's really important to have these kind of tools around so that when you have those volunteers, or even if you want to pay people to come in and translate your software or the documentation around your software or whatever, that they have these tools available so that multiple people can translate at the same time. So I think it is really important, and will become more and more important as in the past 20 years, I mean, globalization has just become crazy. I mean, there was a time back in the early days, back when I was in school, where you didn't really think about translation that much, and then all of a sudden, with the burgeoning of the internet, there's much more focus put on translation, making sure that you have translated versions so people can use your software more easily. So I think these tools are definitely very, very valuable.
Absolutely, absolutely, becoming more essential over time. I mean, it's interesting because since I'm USA centric, because this is where I've grown up. I don't think about the fact that there are many communities out there, especially as we get further and further away from software development, where English isn't even an option, you know, in terms of even having a working understanding of English. I know in the computer industry, English is sort of the lingua franca, which is really odd to say. I use a foreign word to talk about English, but okay. but it is a choice for that. Oh, the irony of that was beautiful. That was nice. Anyway, without too much further ado, let's just move on to this. Let's just go ahead and bring on our guest. I'm gonna mispronounce this, I'm sure I am, but let's go ahead and give it like Mikhail Shihar, something like that. Sorry. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's almost like that. Mikhail Shihar. Hello.
Mikhail Shihar. And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm speaking from Prague in Czech Republic.
Oh, very cool, very cool. I think this is the first. I think it's the first person we've had from the Czech Republic on the show. So, welcome to the show.
It's nice to be first in some show, but yeah, I don't think that matters where the guy lives.
That's right.
Okay.
There's actually
awesome.
a lot of good developers in Prague, or especially, you know, at least I know that from my experience, the companies I've worked for, it seems like we've always had development teams in that area. So seems like a lot of really good technical skill there.
Yeah, there are quite a lot of companies here, especially in whole Czech Republic. There is, if I will be speaking only about Linux stuff, so we have SUSE where I work in Prague. There is also a huge office of Red Hat in Brno, which is second biggest city in the Czech Republic. So yeah, I think we have quite a lot of good developers here.
Mm-hmm.
Very good, very good. So I gave a kind of an overview of what I believe Weblate to be about. Why don't you go ahead and fill us in, though? What's from sort of the high-level view? What problem is Weblate solving, and how did it come about?
Well, we wanted to ease jobs for our translators, and that's how it started. We originally used some other tools, but none of them worked as we wanted, so I ended up writing Weblate, which proved to be useful not only for the PHPMyAdmin where it was originally planned for, but other projects are using that as well right now.
So it's a translation tool. It's actually, people who are listening to this show every week are going to say, well, hey, it's like Poodle then, right? So how is it like Poodle and how is it not like Poodle?
In many areas, it's quite similar. Well, we were originally using Poodle at PHPMyAdmin, so a lot of things are inspired by Poodle, but some things didn't really work well for us, so that's mainly why we decided to write I decided to write something new. The main difference is integration with version control system, so that you basically work with translation as just another branch you would have in version control, and you don't care about anything what goes behind. Weblate does all that stuff to commit translations to Git, and yeah, you don't have to care about the details how it works under the hood.
Well, the thing about Git, though, is that you have a user interface that has to be there in case you have to have merge conflicts. So how would you handle those merge conflicts from some sort of behind-the-scenes use of Git?
Well, we hope that merge conflict don't happen that often.
Of course.
First of all, there is some smart merge driver for Git to help with merging Git text profiles, so that most common conflicts are already handled on Git level, and you don't have to care about them. Mm-hmm. And if conflicts happen, you need to get to underlying Git repository and merge them manually. It's currently no user interface for that, so you are stuck with good old Git tools.
Okay, so it's possible for merge conflicts to happen, but at least you have a way of dealing with that by talking to the underlying Git repo. So what's the basic workflow with this? I'm a developer and I want to have my text translated. How do I approach Weblate to make it work?
Well, if your project is not already set up, you need to install Weblate or just use some Weblate hosting, or just deploy appliances, which are many of them are already available. And once you are done with that, you can add your project. Basically, you just need to enter URL of your Git repository and mask of the files which should be translated. And the project will be imported and shown in the interface on the web.
And so what I'm looking at there is, since I'm writing the code in English and I want you to translate it into Czech, how do you then approach it so you can see what my strings are?
Well, you need to, of course, have your code prepared for localization. So that's not where Weblate would work or would help. So if you are using gettext, Weblate would translate the gettext files, but it won't help you in internationalization of your software. That's completely out of scope.
Well, sure, okay, but so I have to have my strings extracted out into, I'm trying to compare this to Poodle because we just had that show, but so it's .po files, so I have to have extracted out to that. So I have to run that tool independent of Weblate before I upload it, and then I point Weblate at that.
Yeah, you just pointed to the Git repository where your profiles are stored, and that's it.
Okay, and then
with Poodle, basically, you had to somehow upload or manage profiles within the Poodle, but with Weblate, you just point it to Git repository and it updates it. And if you use some service which allows notifications, it can also automatically follow your repository. For example, if you have code on GitHub, you just enable a Weblate hook in GitHub and all changes will automatically get to Weblate and you don't have to care about that workflow much.
I presume there's some way to manage SSH public keys then for this as well?
Yeah, Weblate can manage SSH keys and these can be used to push translations back to GitHub, for example, as well. So if you do both these steps, you have pretty automated workflow where developers don't have to care about translations. They just automatically flow into the repository and translators just care about translating new strings and don't have to care about the branches and all the weird stuff which is going in the Git.
Okay, and also so you're currently using Git. What made you choose Git? Was it just your favorite thing or just something you're already using?
Well, it was the tool I was using and first of all, I absolutely needed distributed version control for Weblate, so because it does changes locally and then it asks for merging them back to upstream. So yeah, it needed distributed version control, and Git was the obvious choice here.
What was your relationship with the My PHP admin project, and why did you get involved with the translation for it?
It's PHP my admin.
Sorry,
not the way around.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, it's most likely my first open source project where I started to contribute. It's I don't know how many years ago, about 15 or something like that, I would say. And yeah, I started as a translator into Czech, and later I became developer, and now I'm one of the project managers as well. But yeah, I started as a translator, and I saw a lot of troubles we had there, and yeah, that's how I got into the localization stuff mostly.
And so from that project, how many other projects do you estimate are now using Weblate, and what kind of scope for those?
Well, there are several smaller projects using hosted Weblate, which we provide for free software projects. There are also some bigger users outside. One of the nice use is the Debian Administrator's Handbook, which is a book with few hundred pages and being translated currently to about 10 languages, I think. So it's quite a big user as well. Another nice thing is OpenStreetMaps for Android, or client for OpenStreetMaps for Android, which is being also translated. They are running their own instance of Weblate. We have also some commercial users, but unfortunately none of them allow us to speak about them. So yeah, that's they exist, but I cannot tell them or mention them.
Sure, I understand. So, what's the development process like on Weblate? You're still the the grand poobah, the chief guy working on it, and then people have to answer to you, or do you have like a community of people decides what's in the next release, or what?
Yeah, it's still mostly driven by me. There are a lot of people contributing some code or ideas, but yeah, the project is still mostly driven by me, and I make the decision when there will be a release or what will be included in that.
And so what's your financial model? Is this just a labor of love to help you solve other problems, or do you see some sort of financial gain from this eventually?
Currently, no. The idea was just let it work, and yeah, I don't plan to make money out of that. But if there turns out to be some opportunity, maybe I will use that. A lot of the stuff was developed during Hack Weeks we have at SUSE, so that's how I can spend quite a lot of time on anything I want. So that's how the time is donated to Weblate. So that's the way how the code actually started. Because without these big chunks of time I could spend on that, it wouldn't work.
How do you? I'm kind of curious about the mechanics of how this all works. So how do you actually get this up and running? How difficult is it to get it? If I had a project and I wanted to start using Weblate, how would I get it? Would I install a package on, let's say I'm using a Debian-based system or a Red Hat-based system? I mean, explain the installation process and how that works.
Right now, the only packages are available for SUSE, so for other systems you need to download. But anyway, we quite encourage people to use current Git version, because the master should be always stable and working. So you anyway would like to get the version from Git. All things Weblate requires are available in pretty much any distro, I think. It's definitely available in Debian, Ubuntu, Fedora, and SUSE, so I think it covers most of the stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And then how would I integrate my project files? I mean, is it just a matter of installing or compiling and installing the software, or what kind of configuration is needed to get it up and running?
It's pretty much standard Django stuff you need to set up. So just you need some database where it will store the data. It supports pretty much anything. It supports Postgres, MySQL, even SQLite, but it's something you probably don't want to use for production setup. So yeah, that's the most important bit you need to do. Of course, you need some web server, most likely Apache or anything what can talk to fast CGI scripts. Actually, for our server, we are using light TTPD.
Mm-hmm. And then what actually gets translated? So is it just the verbiage in the code itself, where I'm actually making something visible to the user, or is it also like man pages, documents, web pages? What will it actually translate for me?
Well, it depends what you put into the Git repository. For example, with Weblate, we are translating the program itself, and we are translating its website. With PHPMyAdmin, we are translating documentation as well, but it depends on the setup of your projects and what you actually want to translate, because documentation is usually quite a huge task, and unless you have a lot of translators, it will never get finished.
Yeah,
with PHPMyAdmin, we have about 2 translations of documentation. We got to be almost finished, and the rest is pretty much incomplete, about 10% or something like that. Most of the languages have translated. So yeah, to translate some documentation, you need a lot of manpower.
Yeah. And what are you using on the back end? I'm just curious because, I know that tools like Google Translate, I mean, they've set up their own services to handle these translations. I mean, what exactly happens on technically if I enter something in English? what actually happens on the back end to make sure that the translation is accurate?
Actually, Weblate does not do automatic translation. If that's you are asking for, it's just interface for translators to edit the string. So Weblate tries to check as much as possible whether the strings conform to what was the original string. So, for example, if there were some format marks or if there was HTML markup. Similar stuff, so that's all what can be checked. There are also some language-specific checks that decide about some different rulings in different languages. For example, some languages have strange rules about spacing around comma or similar stuff.
Right, and what about character-based languages? That must be pretty difficult. Like Chinese and Japanese and those kinds of things.
These are not that different to others. We don't have the format strings and all the stuff is still the same there. And besides that, it's just Unicode text. It doesn't really matter whether it's character-based or word-based language.
So like things like Arabic, and where it's actually moving the opposite direction, where the text flows the opposite way, it handles that as well?
Yeah, right to left languages are supported as well. We got the support about at 1.1 release, I think. It was actually driven by some Arabic translator who needed that stuff. So I think we have complete support for that. At least I understood it that way from him. I, of course, have no clue how these things should work.
Right. What about, we mentioned Git a lot. Obviously, this is built around Git to support Git, but there are lots of other version control systems. Will it work with anything else?
Well, Git is fortunately quite clever. It can use remote helpers to connect to other version control systems. So I think currently Mercurial and Bazaar are supported by that, and I have tested both, and it pretty much works within Weblate. I haven't encountered any problems, so you can use these two. And I don't think there is any other major distributed version control system around.
Mm-hmm. I got another question too. I was just thinking as you were describing this, I mean, we do a lot of document translation outside of software development where I work. So we'll write something in English and then we'll ship it to somebody and they'll translate it into the local language for various sub-regions around the world. I'm just curious, I mean, would there be any reason you could think of that I might want to use this for just normal documents as opposed to, is there any benefit there to using it just for normal translation purposes?
Well, the biggest benefit is if you want more people to cooperate, or especially if you want to be easy to start working on the translation for new contributors. That's the main motivation to providing web interface. If you have just one translator which is doing the stuff, the web interface will not help much, really. It's just another tool he can use. If he is the only one, he can use anything on his desktop what he prefers. But web interface is really nice when you want to get new contributors and get them fast to work, because they don't have to care about anything what is under the hood. They can simply start translating.
So I'm kind of curious. What's the implementation language?
It's Python. It's if you look at Poodle, we are quite close to that. We are using Django as well, and we are using Translate Toolkit to access the translation files. So if you look at this high level, it is really close to what Poodle is doing as well.
And so why the choice of Python?
Because of Translate Toolkit and because I like it. But Translate Toolkit is really great library to access any translation format you want. and I haven't seen anything similar in other languages. So that was quite important piece of the puzzle to make Weblate.
I want to look at that a little bit more because I actually didn't ask many questions last week about Translate Toolkit. What is it actually giving you? What access to the files, or is it giving you I don't know, map? Well, tell me. I don't know anything about it, so tell me what Translate Toolkit's about.
Oh, well, Translate Toolkit has several parts, but the most important stuff is parser of many translation formats. Of course, there is getText files, there are Qt strings, Java properties, and several other formats I don't remember. iPhone strings, Android Trezor strings, and pretty much anything what is used for translation. And you get quite standard interface to access all of that. So you don't have to care which file format you are accessing and how to get data from that. It will just give you a list of units with each of them that has source and translation, and you just build the interface around that.
Yes, I guess that would make it a little bit simpler, sort of like the universal glue for all those formats. And it's always interesting when different people come up with different ways to represent exactly the same thing. And it's always frustrating to me, like how many different image formats are there? How many different movie formats are there? And they're all basically doing the same thing. They're recording, a sound or a picture or whatever, but all different stories like that. So Translate Toolkit is your interface to that. Now, are you using, is Weblate itself translated, and are you using your own product to do that?
Yeah, of course. We are using Weblate to translate Weblate, and we are currently translated to about 15 languages, I think. I might be not accurate. I have no clue, actually. It automatically flows into our repository, and I don't follow it that closely.
Okay, and so what would you say is probably the most number of languages any single product has been translated into using Weblate?
I think it would be PHP-MyAdmin, because we have about 70 languages there.
Say 70? 70?
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty amazing, actually. And how do you find people that are willing and able to do the translation into their native language, or at least a language they know? I presume people are hopefully translating it into their native language, so it gets it better. But how do you find people like that? I mean, like if I had a project and I had, I wanted to make it internationalized, where would I go to say I needed this translated into French and Spanish and stuff? How do you locate people like that?
First of all, we have some sort of advertisement for translators in the product itself. So when a user chooses some language which is not fully translated, he gets some notice that he might want to help with the translation. I think this brings some new translators, and of course we try to promote that possibility on our website, on mailing lists, and all the traditional stuff, I would say.
Is anybody using Weblate, do you think, for paid translators, or is this all volunteer effort, or maybe a mix of both?
I think the companies I have mentioned are using that for paid translators, but I have no details about their workflow. But
of course,
as the installation is closed down, it must be paid translators using that. They wouldn't close it down for volunteers, I would say.
But is there also a ready supply of volunteers for many languages?
I don't know if there are enough of them. Some of the languages are definitely behind, and yeah, it's sometimes hard to find translators, but for many languages where the computers and internet is spread, it's quite easy to get somebody who would contribute.
Cool. And does Weblate already know about every possible language, or is it limited to something that you support, and then if someone wants to do something else, they have to fix Weblate?
administrator can define his languages or parameters of languages, but Weblate comes with about 160 definitions built in, so pretty much any interesting language is covered.
Including Klingon?
I don't know. I would have to look it out.
Sorry, I had to throw you for a loop there. I just had to ask that because I forgot to ask that last week. But yeah.
I'm sure we don't translate into Klingon anything I know of, but I don't know.
If you did, you'd have to turn the volume down on the speakers because it'd just be too loud. That's all I know. It's just crazy stuff. I'm sorry, I drew a blank. I've done this before. It was crazy that. What? Again, I'm trying to distinguish this from Poodle because I know people who've watched last week's show and now they're saying, "Well, here's another one." Do you think you're further along than Poodle, or do you think that you're still sort of catching up? And if so, what are your unique features that people might want to use Weblate over Poodle about?
Well, the unique features are the ones which actually started our development. One is version control integration. That means that everything goes to Git and every translation is committed under the translator name so that you have proper credits stored within your version control about who translated what. That's what we wanted to achieve, and that's quite a major thing which gets lost within Poodle, because once you export the stuff from the Poodle, you just get a translation file, and whoever commits that to version control is claimed to be the author, but it's not actually the one who has translated that. Yeah. And the second stuff we have is support for multiple branches, because we want to push translations not only to our current development branch, but also to stable branches when we make some stable releases. And that's also something which really didn't work within Poodle. So Weblate has support for that and allows to pushing translation into multiple branches at once. Translator just edits one string and it's get automatically pushed to all branches which are configured.
Now, you've been involved with Weblate since the beginning. What was your open source experience before that?
Quite a lot of that. As I mentioned already, I started with PHPMyAdmin. Then I spent quite a lot of time with doing software for talking with mobile phones. It's called Gamu. It's written in C, and it has a Python graphical interface. Graphical interface written in Python, and yeah, it's allowed to talk with the phone, send messages, download contacts, and all that stuff. But it's pretty dead dead now because everybody uses smartphones and they back up their data to cloud and all that new stuff. And yeah, it's not much space for some software within your computer which would talk to your phone. So it's mostly like finished product right now. And yeah, I spent some time on various other small projects and contributed to other stuff. But yeah, I think these are the most important things.
And so, since your English is obviously a lot better than my Czech, how did you learn English? Is that like taught to everybody in schools, or is that some particular thing that you knew you'd need to know?
I've learned mostly by reading stuff, I would say, because if you look at computers, most of the documentation is in English, so that's how you learn quite a lot. Of course, I had English at school, and I have some friends from other countries, so that's how I got to this level of English, which I would not definitely call perfect, but as you said, it's better than your Czech.
Yes, it's absolutely better. I think I probably wouldn't even know one word yet. I could probably figure something out, but yeah, not going to do that. So I just also, we're running out of time, so I just want to wrap up a little bit here. So what's in the future for Weblate? What's your roadmap look like?
For the next release, we have some nice features like voting for translation, so that it won't be enough for one translator to submit the strings, so that more the translator will have to agree on some string before it gets used. It's mostly useful for bigger projects which have a lot of translators. Yeah, I think this is the biggest thing we will get. We will also get some improved support for Android resource strings, which is quite nice format used by Android applications. And some people are pushing me to improve support for that, so most likely they will get it.
And do you need assistance with that? And if so, what kind of people are you looking for?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of the question.
Are you looking for people to do that? And if so, what kind of people are you looking for?
Well, basically, we don't focus on anything. Of course, we would like to attract some translators, because not only they would translate Weblate, but they also can give us valuable feedback how things are different in their language. So that's always strange to hear some feedback from language you have never heard of, and it does some things quite differently than you have ever thought. And yeah, we would like to get any developers who would like to improve Weblate. It's simple as that. We don't have to look for any specific knowledge.
And I've often said that about open source projects. It's like, you're looking for feedback from people who may not even be programmers, but just people that want to use your system. And that's valuable to you as the designer of the code, because then you can adopt and adapt it to a more broader problem set. So you're saying that just somebody sitting in a bug report saying, for Chinese characters, it does something wrong or whatever, that's useful to you, right?
Yeah, that's really valuable feedback, because I know Czech, a little bit of German and English, and that's all I can tell about languages. And I have no clue how these things work in Chinese, Indian, or whatever other language in the world.
Awesome. So people can contribute even without being coders. And like I said, I've said this over and over again, and people don't seem to understand this about open source projects, that even those bug reports contribute to the project. So I'm glad you brought that up. Is there anything we did?
Quite a lot of translators get that, and we got quite a lot of feedback already, especially if you were mentioning the right-to-left languages. It wouldn't become available if there wouldn't be translator behind that.
Okay, cool. And is there anything else we haven't asked you that you want to make sure our audience is aware of?
Yeah, don't be afraid of contributing to translations. Usually, some other language than English, so that's quite easy way to contribute to open source.
Yeah, I know just enough Spanish to get me in trouble in bars, but not enough to get me out of trouble. So that's about where I'm at with my first second language. Anyway, and I got to ask the two required questions, or my audience will email me tomorrow. What's your favorite scripting language?
Python.
Okay, that was expected. And your favorite text editor?
VI.
Man, lost on both counts this time again. I know. Scoreboard's not going in my direction for the last 8 or 9 shows. Darn it. Oh, well. But the Pearl guy was on. He was good. He had a favorite. But I think he was still a Vim guy, too. Anyway, so it's been a pleasure having you on. Really appreciated that, and especially the comparison to Poodle, because I know our audience now has even more ways to do translation stuff. And I thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, and have a nice day.
Absolutely. My day's just beginning. Your day is probably nearly to the end. So that was, I'm going to mispronounce this game one more time, Michal Shia, something really close to that, or even very far away from that. Aaron, what do you think?
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I mean, like I said, it would be interesting to see how this would work for just a group of people, or doing translation, even just for normal documents, or for, like you were getting into, the questions about paid translations, opening this up and say, hey, look, I'll translate that document for $100, and or my team will, or my company will, whatever. then you have multiple people working on it. So I think it's really interesting. I missed the Poodle show, and I know you were trying to tease out the comparisons between this and Poodle. It does sound like they're fairly similar. I mean, what do you think about that in terms of the Poodle comparison?
Well, since Poodle was already around when he started this, I know that this is a little bit downstream from that. Not downstream, but like, younger. Let's just say younger. That's probably the only word I can use there. And so it's kind of why I was curious about, where does he think this stands in terms of development and timing in that. It sounds like, though, that with the integration with Git, if that's important to you, then Weblate would clearly be the choice of the two. And I can't imagine that won't be added back to Poodle sometime soon if people find it important, because that's the way open source software works, is people, keep, incorporating things that are necessary there. And it occurs to me, and I didn't discuss this last week, I shouldn't have sounds turned on my laptop, huh? Okay. Sounds off. Okay, sorry. I don't know if you heard the little beep, but I was going, okay, that's dangerous. I have the sound still turned on. I normally have it muted the whole time.
Pay no attention to the sounds in the background.
Exactly, yeah, ignore that, ignore that. It occurs to me, and I didn't think about this last week, but something like Poodle or Weblate could be, for some entrepreneur, could be the basis for an entire, business where you could set up, you could start hiring translators all over the world and have something like Poodle or Weblate, or I think we had, was it Xanderin? I keep forgetting the name.
That sounds close. If it's not right, it's close.
Zarina, Zalsamar, or whatever the thing was, the Z we had back on a while ago. I think I didn't do that interview. That's probably why I don't remember it. But to base an entire business around this, because getting software translated is very important. And if you develop like and this could all be done in the cloud. I mean, it could all be done remotely. You just need to have the right people and have ways to pay them all.
Right.
It sounds like a great way to if somebody's out there in the community trying to figure out how they can make money on using open source software. This sounds like a great opportunity.
Yep, definitely.
And that's it for that.
And that's it. That's all I have to say. It really sounds good to me.
It's great. I appreciate it's cool knowing that we're doing open source software all over the world. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is our first Czech guy on. I know it's the first person that has non-ASCII characters in his name, because we had a little trouble getting started on the show. And I appreciate him allowing me to mispronounce his name now about 6 times. So that sounds about all I'm going to say about him. But I have things to talk about in terms of upcoming guests. Next week have a really interesting show. And Aaron, you're going to be back for that, because it's Ceph, the file system. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, since you know a lot about that?
Yeah, so Ceph is really interesting because it does not only traditional NAS type, I believe it even could do direct attach type storage as a file system, but it also does object-based storage, I believe. We'll have to ask them about that, which is really big if you're deploying a cloud infrastructure in your company, or something where you want object-based storage and you want to use APIs to make your storage calls as opposed to file system storage calls. You can do either, I believe. Very similar to Gluster, if you're familiar with Gluster, which Red Hat purchased not too long ago. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be a really interesting discussion, at least for me.
And to translate that in English, I think you used a lot of buzzwords there. I can explain 2 of those concepts, though. One is like Amazon S3 is object store, which means that you can say, I want to put this object at this address. And later on you can say, what's the object at this address? And you get it back.
Right.
And those can be served as files directly to web servers, but it doesn't look like a mounted file system. It looks like a bunch of gets and puts.
Exactly, which is sometimes easier for the software to communicate directly with, as opposed to having to pull in a module to actually handle the file system calls.
Yeah, and on the other side, though, Amazon also provides essentially attached storage, which to the operating system looks like an ordinary disk. And so you read and write disk blocks. And Ceph has both modes, as far as the presentation I saw 6 months ago, has both modes of being able to get to it. But better than that, it's also distributed and replicated and automatic failover and all sorts of great stuff. So I know that we've actually got a Ceph cluster here at work, at my current primary client, I should say. No, I don't work here. I'm not employed here. It's just a client. Just a client. Okay. Because I've only worked for one company in the last 27 years, and that's mine. my company, Stonehenge. But here at my primary client's location, they're using Ceph for some distributed file system, redundant file system stuff. So that's kind of cool. So I'm looking forward to this upcoming guest next week, and you'll be back to talk about them. We just added to the schedule for 2 weeks from now when I'm not here. But you guys, somebody's going to take over. I think it's actually Dan and Randy are going to do this. Sauce Labs. Sauce Labs is a very interesting concept. It's a testing environment where you can do automated test suites tied to your GitHub repo and all that sort of stuff. But more than that, they have the ability to launch a VM of multiple different operating systems. And let's say you have a web-based app that you can actually test it on all 95 different web browsers. And you can either run those manually by clicking on things through a VNC window, or you can run it automated through some sort of Selenium tests or other sorts of browser tests. And what's great about this is I don't have access to 95 browsers. So it's a commercial service, but they have an open source aspect to it. They contribute upstream to a lot of the open source projects that they use. But they also, if you're doing an open source project, you get a free account, which means you can test your open source software on any of 95 browsers. They also have smartphone updates so that you can actually test open source software that you're putting on smartphones. It looks like a really, really interesting project. So we're just adding them. They're coming up 2 weeks from now. And 3 weeks from now, we're bringing back the bacon. We're bringing back the bacon. The bacon is coming home. We're going to talk about the Ubuntu phone with none other than our friend John O'Bacon. I'm still sending out email. I'm getting very slow responses to fill the rest of the Q2. But if you want to see how Q2 is running, you can go to twit.tv/floss. The link is there to talk about all the other people we have upcoming. Let's see if I can get my thing in the right place here so I can read these things. So if you go there, you can see the spreadsheet. And if you have a project that is not on that list and you want them to be on it, you can have the project leader email me, merlin@stonehenge.com, and I will add them. We also have a Google Plus handle, Floss Weekly. I try to post when I get new guests there. We have Identica and Twitter handles, Floss Weekly, all one word. We do have a chat room. We took a couple questions in the chat room today. We are at live.twit.tv. We tape typically at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Times. There's more than one. Pacific time on Wednesdays. The T isn't kicking in very well. That must be the problem. Okay. You can follow me personally, Merlin, Merlyn, and on Twitter and Identica, and also Randall L. Schwartz on Google+. As I've said a couple times, I am going to be missing the show in a couple weeks. I'm going on the 2013 Low-Carb Cruise, where I get to hang out with other people who have done similar results or better results than I have done. My 45 pounds lost in 6 months, and my 6 inches off my waist, and my blood pressure going down into 0, and my gout going away, and all the other wonderful things that have happened to me.
Your blood pressure went down to 0?
Yeah.
Aren't you dead? I think you die when that happens, Randall. Are you just a ghost now?
I think maybe I'm mismeasuring it then. Oh, you're supposed to actually wear the cuff? I thought you're supposed to leave it over there. Never mind. All right.
That's impressive. Wow.
So I'll be missing it in 2 weeks, but I will be back for the John O'Bacon episode. So that'll be really cool. And I'm hoping to flesh out the rest of Q2 before we have to cancel a show of any kind. That's all I have to promote this week. Aaron, what are you promoting this week?
I am promoting me.
Yay! You're now your manager.
That's right. That's right. I'm my own manager. If you want to follow the things that I'm doing, you can check out Google Plus is the best place to follow me because I actually am much more able to engage with people that have questions or want to talk and stuff. So add me to your circles on Google Plus. Follow me on Facebook or Twitter. I am there as well. And if you're going to be at the Bay Area Maker Fair, I will be there as well. So make sure, send me a note on Google Plus, or if you want to just meet up somewhere. I may or may not be at a booth. I'm not sure at this point, but I may be representing some open hardware there, or maybe not. It's up in the air at this point, but I will be there in any case. So send me a note if you want to get some coffee or just try to meet up somewhere and all the craziness that is Maker Fair. And if you're not going, I'd highly recommend that you go out and get a ticket and stop by because it is an awesome experience. So definitely check that out. And like I said, if you see me around, wave, say hi, something, let me know.
Cool. And I guess I'll be seeing you next week on this show, and I'm hoping the rest of our audience will join us along. I'm going to quit this show now because I am just really getting crazy. Anyway, we'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.